You have been deceived by them regarding death. And what is the evidence? There is a paper from the CIA that has been declassified. They have been telling you for ages that death is the end, that consciousness disappears the moment your body stops operating, and that this is the end. So, religion provides reassuring tales. However, science considers the concept of a hereafter to be nothing more than superstition. Nevertheless, what if the reality is something completely different? What if the government of the United States has been aware for hundreds of years that death is not the end, but rather a transition? There is evidence that consciousness does not pass away with the body. Rather, it moves beyond the body and into realms that beyond conventional understanding. This information is hidden within files that have been declassified. What we are discussing here is not only conjecture or imagination. Rather, it is research that has been buried deep within classified archives. And it is an investigation into the nature of reality, human perception, and what happens after we leave this world behind. It is not a question that these records ask, but rather they affirm that there is life after death. Once you have a better understanding of what they have concealed, you will never again look at life or death in the same way. This is because what you are going to uncover will significantly alter your perspective on existence itself. Not only in theory, but also through classified tests, psychological warfare programs, and research into altered states of awareness that is supported by the military. The United States government has been concerned with the limitations of human consciousness for decades. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, organizations such as the Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, were sponsoring covert research into the nature of reality itself, while the general public was preoccupied with politics and entertainment. What they were asking was not merely about espionage or the protection of the nation's security. Rather, it was about something much more significant. Where do we go after we pass away? The year 2003 saw the covert declassification of a document that had previously been classified, which was then buried beneath thousands of pages of routine government paperwork. As part of the Central Intelligence Agency's CIA examination into the true potential of human consciousness, this document, which was known as the Gateway Process Report, was created. One of the most remarkable things that it described was the fact that the mind is not constrained by the physical body, and that consciousness itself is not restricted to spaces and times. This was neither a philosophical system or a spiritual belief. Rather, it was study conducted by the officials of the government. Over the course of a number of top-secret studies, the Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, has put millions of dollars into the investigation of what takes place when awareness is separated from the body. Their interest was not merely concerned with science. Rather, it was strategic. So if it were feasible for human awareness to exist outside of the body and beyond death, then what else could be possible? It is possible to train someone to move between other realms. The ability to obtain information outside of the restrictions of time is a possibility for intelligence agents. Was death merely a reprogramming of reality rather than a conclusion to the series? Conspiracy theorists on the fringes were not the ones who posed these issues. Rather, they were being investigated at the highest levels of government confidentially. But why is that? How could the Central Intelligence Agency, which is a government agency focused on power and control, be concerned about what happens to us after we pass away if consciousness continues beyond death? Because manipulating one's view of death is the same as controlling one's experience of life itself, the answer is as frightening as it is fascinating. It would be possible for the public to fundamentally rewrite society's understanding of fear, control, and human potential if they genuinely understood what these writings stated, which is that death is not an end, but rather a doorway. And it wasn't only about the hereafter when it came to this. The findings of the study indicated something even more fundamental, namely that our thoughts are capable of fleeing the very fabric of the physical reality that we experienced. It is believed that individuals could reach dimensions that defy logic, interact with energies that are beyond human comprehension, and even comprehend knowledge that spans time itself through altered states of consciousness. In the event that this is the case, what may it imply for the way in which we experience life? These documents will never be viewed by the majority of people. The majority of individuals will never seriously question what they have been told. However, you are not the majority of individuals, After you have started to piece together all of this information, it will be hard for you to view the world in the same manner again. Certain information is not suitable for public dissemination on YouTube. For this reason, we have included exclusive and more in-depth insights within our free newsletter, which is called Insights Academy. In addition, if you sign up right now, you will be given a free copy of the Kybalion. But this offer is only valid for a limited time. See the URL that is provided in the description. They have been aware of it for many years, the reality is. They have investigated consciousness after death has occurred. They have made investments in research that is conducted outside of the body. They have studied and experimented with methods that can disentangle the mind from the physical body. Even if they have gone into such great efforts to investigate this matter in complete secrecy, the question that really matters is not whether or not consciousness is able to survive death. A more pertinent issue is, what other information do they possess that we do not? There was more to the CIA's investigation than just what happens after death. Even though they were still alive, they were actively conducting research on how to alter consciousness. In the center of this inquiry was a program that was known as the Gateway Process. This program was supposed to teach people how to transcend the physical limitations of their bodies and access higher realms of awareness. This was not a matter of speculation. Inducing altered states of consciousness was accomplished by the utilization of precisely constructed sound frequencies, meditation techniques, and brainwave synchronization. This was accomplished on the basis of a scientific framework. To what end? To disentangle the mind from the body, thereby enabling individuals to experience dimensions that extend beyond the confines of time and space. In the paper that has been declassified, the Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, portrays consciousness as a vibrational energy field that is capable of existing apart from the body. Subjects were presented with the opportunity to experience astral projection, remote viewing, and out-of-body travel through the utilization of a specific set of techniques. This is not a myth or a piece of folklore. In order to accomplish this, the government of the United States was actively training people to do it. The Monroe Institute, a research institution that specialized in consciousness investigation and brainwave training, was the one that came up with the idea for the Gateway Process. They conducted a series of experiments over the course of several years and found that by syncing the two hemispheres of the brain using binaural beats, it was possible for an individual to achieve a state in which their consciousness became separated from their physical body. In this mood, it appeared as though the boundaries of reality itself were dissolving. Those who participated in the study described feeling as though they were floating outside of their bodies, gaining information from faraway places, and even experiencing higher dimensional regions. Some people have characterized it as having the experience of looking at the universe from the outside, coming to the realization that the physical world is simply a small part of a much broader reality. Also, what is the most shocking aspect? It was taken quite seriously by the CIA. The question arises as to why a government body whose primary mission is to gather intelligence would be interested in teaching people how to leave their bodies. Given that awareness is not limited to the physical body, perception is also not confined to the body. During the Gateway Process, participants reported that they were able to see locations, events, and information happening in real time, regardless of the distance between them. This ability was created through the process of remote viewing. The repercussions were really spectacular. Imagine a situation in which an intelligence service is able to spy on other countries' governments, gain access to confidential papers, or even peek into the future without ever getting out of the room. The Gateway Process was looking into this particular field of study. Beyond the gathering of intelligence, however, these findings concealed something much more significant than I had anticipated. This is evidence that the mind continues to exist after bodily death. If individuals were able to leave their bodies at will, if they were able to travel outside of space and time while they were still alive, then what would that imply about the concept of death itself? According to the documents that were found in the Gateway, death is not the end. There is a change from one state of awareness to another within the same individual. The act of dying is not the same thing as destruction. The movement of awareness from one level of reality to another comes about as a result of variations in frequency. All of this was known to the government. People looked into it. Experiments were conducted with it. And the very fact that this research was conducted at all is evidence of a truth that cannot be refuted. It is not in their best interest for you to comprehend who you really are. Because once you come to the realization that consciousness is not dependent on the body, and once you comprehend that reality itself is nothing more than a projection of the mind, you transform into something that is potentially harmful. You will be liberated. However, if this is the information that they are willing to declassify, then what other information is still being kept secret? To what extent are there other realities regarding existence, consciousness, and death that are concealed within the vaults of the government? What is more essential is the question of why they are concealing it from you. If the body is not the only place where awareness can be found, then what happens after the body passes away? The answer that was supplied via the gateway process was unsettling. One that is consistent with both the principles of quantum physics and the spiritual teachings of the past. The materials that have been declassified seem to indicate that death is not an end, but rather a transition. According to the scientific community, energy can only be converted. It cannot be destroyed. In the realm of physics, this is the most fundamental principle. In the event that this is the case, what happens to the energy that constitutes your individual consciousness? In the event that your mind is nothing more than a collection of electrical signals and vibrational frequencies, then each time your body ceases functioning, the energy that is contained within it does not disappear. It transitions into a different form. It's not a matter of guesswork. According to the findings of the Central Intelligence Agency's research, consciousness runs on a frequency-based system. That is to say, the mind does not completely vanish when the body passes away. There is a change in the vibrational plane that it changes to. To put it another way, even when you pass away, your consciousness does not belittle you. It simply exists in a different location. This concept has been around for quite some time. Throughout the millennia, ancient civilizations have had this understanding. Death is not the end of existence. Rather, it is the beginning of a transformation, according to the teachings of the Egyptians, Hindus, Buddhists, and even Hermetic philosophers. The Tibetan Book of the Dead, much like the gateway documents developed by the Central Intelligence Agency, views death as a transition between different levels of consciousness. However, the fact that this is not merely a matter of spiritual belief is what makes this so horrifying. This research is supported by the government. Give it some thought. If the act of dying is nothing more than a shift in frequency, then what does this imply about the very nature of life? Imagine for a moment that our entire perception of reality is nothing more than a projection of consciousness into a certain vibratory range. What happens if we don't even go anyplace when we pass away? Every morning we just awaken to a more advanced state of being. Here is where things take an even more peculiar turn. The idea that our reality is actually a holographic projection has been put up by a few scientist researchers. In other words, everything that we perceive, feel, and experience is nothing more than information that our consciousness is processing by itself. It would appear that dying is not about leaving anything behind if that is the case. What it's all about is coming to terms with the actual nature of existence. Documents from the CIA provide hints about this. The idea that our consciousness is reabsorbed into the larger field of energy that constitutes the universe is what they propose happens when we pass away. Others refer to this as the source, others refer to it as God, but the concept remains the same. Death is nothing more than the dissolution of the limits of the self, and individuality is but a fleeting state of mind. This demonstrates that you have never been really isolated from the rest of the cosmos. Your awareness is a component of something that is significantly more expansive than the human experience. Furthermore, when the body passes away, that awareness simply reverts back to its primordial nature. This is the question that really matters. If this information is accurate, then why is it not universally accepted? Why is it that they don't teach us about this in school? The question that has to be answered is why our culture is constructed on the fear of death rather than a comprehension of and death. Uncomplicated is the response. Those who are fearful are easier to dominate. The reason for this is that if people realize that they were never genuinely linked to this world, and if they recognize that death was not something to fear, then governments, businesses, and religious institutions would lose their authority. It is essential for individuals to be terrified of losing their lives, their riches, and their identities for the entire system to function properly. But if you actually knew that death is only another form of existence, what would you do differently if anything like that happened to you? Would you continue to pursue non-essential material possessions regardless? Are you willing to continue to live your life in constant terror of what is ahead? Alternately, would you begin your life with the realization that you are more than this body and more than this experience? The documents called the Gateway provide the impression that we are everlasting creatures of energy that are momentarily residing in physical forms. Death is nothing more than a gateway. In addition, the truth is that you were never actually incarcerated in the facility that they had led you to believe you were in originally. In the event that this is the case, what does this imply about the concept of time itself? Because these declassified papers claim that even time is an illusion, even time itself is an illusion. Moreover, the events that take place after death can be far more shocking than you could have ever imagined. What would happen if everything you believed you knew about time turned out to be a lie? What if the past, the present, and the future are not distinct from one another at all, but rather occur simultaneously? The declassified study conducted by the Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, not only undermines our comprehension of consciousness and death, but it also radically rewrites our view of time itself. According to the Gateway process, reality is a vibrational construct, which means that everything we experience is determined by the frequencies that our consciousness is tuned into. And according to this paradigm, the passage of time is not linear. Moving forward is not a clear and straightforward way. As opposed to this, time operates more like a field, which is something that can be traversed, just like space operates. It would appear that the moment of death is not a conclusion, but rather an expansion if this is the case. After your physical body has stopped functioning, your consciousness will no longer be constrained by the limitations of linear time or space. It is possible that you will suddenly become aware of all time simultaneously, rather than perceiving the past, the present, and the future as though they were separate events. I'm not simply speculating about this. An eerie similarity is reported by a large number of individuals who have had near-death experiences, sometimes known as NDEs. They describe the sensation of having their entire life flash before their eyes, not as a series of recollections, but rather as a one interconnected moment. The ability to relive past experiences, not as memories, but as if they were happening all over again, is something that some people claim they have experienced. It was as if they had completely gone beyond the confines of time. Moreover, there is something that is much more peculiar. Some people who have had near-death experiences report that they were able to see what will happen in the future, as if they had briefly gained access to an aspect of reality in which time does not move in the manner that we believe it does. Numerous individuals have reported having the experience of timeless awareness, in which they were able to witness not just their own existence, but also entire events that were occurring beyond the comprehension of humans. This is supported by research conducted by the CIA. The documents that they have provided indicate that the Gateway process shows that individuals are able to receive information that spans time while they are in altered states of consciousness. On the other hand, this indicates that death, which is the moment when your mind is no longer tied to a physical body, can actually make it possible for you to move totally outside of time. Now, however, this is where things become even more troubling. In the event that time is an illusion, what does this imply about the concept of death itself? If the past is still around and the future has already occurred, then is it possible that we will never actually pass away? On the other hand, do we merely move our consciousness to a different point in the timeline? It is impossible to overstate the ramifications of this. It gives the impression that as you are passing away, you might be able to experience everything at the same time. Every version of oneself, the past and the future, are all included within a single instant of awareness that is timeless. If this is the case, then it would imply that you are not simply progressing through life. Rather, you are existing in each and every moment simultaneously, but your consciousness is only tuned into one experience at a time. In the event that this is the case, it would appear that death is not about traveling someplace at all. There is a possibility that when we pass away, we just become aware of the fact that we have been everywhere all along. The way that civilization is organized is entirely demolished by this knowledge of time. What kinds of changes would occur in our way of life if people come to the realization that their existence is not limited to a single timeline and that their consciousness has the ability to access an endless number of different versions of reality? The question that is more relevant is how it would alter our perspective on death. Because if death is nothing more than a shift into a different level of consciousness, then what comes after death might be something that is beyond anything that we are even capable of comprehending. According to the documents that were found in the Gateway, this is precisely what the government has been attempting to gain an understanding of. Because if consciousness is able to transcend time, then what other things is it capable of doing? More importantly, what other information are they trying to conceal from us? It has been conveyed to us that death is the ultimate mystery, something that we will never be able to comprehend unless we have experienced it for ourselves. However, what if that is not the case? What would happen if the time of death had already been mapped out, analyzed, and documented, not only by religious traditions, but also by scientific study and government programs? The CIA files that have been declassified provide evidence that death is not the end. During this shift, one enters a state of existence in which reality itself transforms into something quite new altogether. When it comes to near-death experiences, also known as NDEs, the tunnel of light is one of the occurrences that is most frequently recorded. The identical feeling is routinely described by individuals who have been clinically dead for a few minutes, and occasionally even for several hours. Being drawn into a tunnel that was filled with an overpowering sense of calm, warmth, and knowledge, leaving their body and hovering above it, and being drawn into the tunnel. As they progress further into this place, they experience a diminishing sense of connection to their physical body, and they become increasingly associated with something that is beyond the comprehension of humans. Now, what exactly is this light? Is it just a trick that the brain makes when it's dying? But is it something else entirely? It appears that this shift is not a hallucination, according to the gateway process theory. There has been a change in the vibrational consciousness. You will no longer be constrained by the perception of material reality as your consciousness begins to detach from the physical body. If you look closely, you won't notice the light. A other condition of being, something that goes beyond the capabilities of the human brain, is what it has become. And this is where things take an even more peculiar turn. Many individuals who have had near-death experiences have reported coming into contact with creatures of light, who are entities that appear to radiate intellect and understanding that is beyond anything that we are aware of in the physical world. They are sometimes referred to as guides, ancestors, or even higher versions of themselves by several individuals. Some people believe that these beings are not distinct in any way, but rather an extension of their own awareness that is waiting for them on the other side. This concept is consistent with the materials in the CIA's Gateway. According to the findings of the research, consciousness is a field of energy that exists outside of the body, and when a person dies, it simply reintegrates into the larger whole. To phrase it another way, it is possible that the entity that people refer to as God, Source, or the light is not in any way anything external. It is possible that it is you, the part of you that has always been there but that you have forgotten about while you have been forced to endure this bodily experience. At this point, the concept of ego death, which refers to the total destruction of the self as we know us, it comes into play. It is common practice to depict the moment of death as a return to unity, in which the individual self vanishes and what remains is a state of pure awareness. This is consistent with the findings of the Gateway process, which revealed that reality is a holographic projection of consciousness. When the body dies, the projection collapses, leaving only the observer left. On the other hand, everybody has a different experience. The individuals who have had near-death experiences have said that they have entered other realms, alternate dimensions, parallel versions of reality, or even entire landscapes that appear to shift based just on their thoughts. The Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, admitted in the Gateway documents that altered states of consciousness could enable individuals to observe and interact with other planes of reality, which could be just as real as this one. If what you say is accurate, then the place you go after death might not be preset. Rather, it might be something that you decide for yourself. According to the teachings of certain religious traditions, the beliefs that you hold about the hereafter have a direct impact on the experiences that you have. It is possible that this is the reason why many civilizations have varied interpretations of the afterlife, heaven, reincarnation, the void, and ancestral regions among themselves. How about the possibility that death is not a predetermined location, but rather a portal that leads to wherever your mind anticipates it will go? In the event that the gateway process is accurate, then death is not about departing. Rather, it is about awakening. Awakening to the reality that you were never just this body, and you were never just this one lifetime. When your physical body stops functioning, the only thing that happens is that you realize that you have always been a part of something that is more significant. However, if this is the fact and death is nothing more than a transition, then why has this information been buried? What is the rationale for the design of society based on the fear of death? If we understood the truth about what happens at the time of death, how would it affect the way we conduct our lives? Particularly crucial is the question of how it might alter the way we think about control. For the simple reason that if death is not the end, then what authority do governments, institutions, and other forms of control actually have over you? It's possible that this is the most important secret of all. The United States government has spent decades researching what happens after death, and the Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, has classified records indicating that awareness is not linked to the body. If these things are true, then why is this information not common knowledge? How come it is not taught in schools? Why is it not debated in mainstream science, and why is it not regarded as fact? The answer is as unsettling as it is evident, on account of the fact that the fear of death is the basis of control. Give it some thought. Everyone who believes that this life is the only one there is essential to the functioning of every major power structure, including governments, religions, financial organizations, and corporate industries. I believe that death is the end, and that everything depends on what you do at this moment. Because of this, people continue to remain obedient. People are able to continue working jobs that they despise, according to regulations that they do not challenge, and remaining inside the boundaries that society has established for them because of this, mostly due to the fact that what happens when individuals cease being afraid. The moment they come to the realization that consciousness is eternal and that life is but a component of a much larger experience, what happens to them? The situation becomes out of control. Their fear of being punished, it is no longer present. Eventually, they quit complying to the systems that were designed to keep them at a small size. Because they have come to the realization that genuine power has never been derived from outside sources, they have stopped looking for validation from governments, companies, and religious leaders. At all times, it has been within. This information is alluded to in the declassified gateway materials. The Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, was conducting human consciousness research, not simply out of scientific interest, but also as a means of gaining power. If it is possible for the mind to live outside of the body and for perception to travel beyond the confines of time and space, then this implies two things. They have been trained to believe that people are far less powerful than they actually are. Anyone who has access over that information has influence over reality itself. And this is precisely the reason why this information has been concealed here. However, if death is nothing more than a portal, then what does this imply about life? If it is impossible to eradicate consciousness, then what does this imply about people who want to exert control over us through the use of fear? The fact of the matter is that the entire system that governs modern society is structured to instill a sense of dread in you by making you fear the loss of something that was never in any way in danger. You should give some thought to the extent to which your life has been shaped by your fear of dying. Fear that one will not have enough time, fear of experiencing pain, fear of things that are not known. What if, however, the most important secret of all is that there is absolutely nothing to be afraid of? That death is not the end of you, but rather the dismantling of the illusion that you have created for yourself? That you are not this body, this job, this name, or this life, but rather something that is larger than all of these things combined? During the gateway process, it was hypothesized that reality itself is a holographic projection. This would imply that the life that we experience is but one layer of perception. Through their investigation, the Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, came to the conclusion that awareness is the underlying fabric of reality, and that our physical experience is merely a means of transient interaction. The teachings of old spiritual traditions, which have been passed down for thousands of years, are precisely in line with this. Numerous religious groups, including Buddhists, Gnostics, Hermeticists, and even quantum scientists, are all of the opinion that the same thing is true. The reality is not the same as it appears. There is more to death than we realize. Why then should it be kept a secret? A society that does not dread death is a society that does not obey, and this is the reason why. A society that does not revere those in positions of authority, that does not mindlessly obey, and that does not seek validation from outside sources because it is aware, on some level, that all of this is only temporary. This concept of consciousness is limitless. It is for this reason that governments have made investments in propaganda, thought control, and psychological warfare systems, mostly due to the fact that the final conflict is not fought with weapons. A battle of perception is being conducted. If you have the ability to influence the way a person thinks about life, death, and reality, then you do not need to exert any other influence over them. They are going to take care of it for you. Therefore, you should ask yourself, if they have been concealing this fact, if they have been studying consciousness for decades in secret while telling the public that it is nonsense, then what other misinformation have they been spreading? Is there anything else that they are keeping hidden? And more importantly, why do they have such a strong aversion to the idea that you do know the truth? For the reason that once you are able to see through the illusion, you will no longer be a piece in their game. And this is precisely what they do not want to happen. If death is not the end, if consciousness remains beyond the body, and if the government has spent decades studying how to manage and control that knowledge, then the question that deserves the most attention is not what happens to us when we pass away. The question is, how can we set ourselves free while we are still alive? The reason for this is that, isn't that the true secret? There is more to it than just dying. This pertains to life. The moment you stop being afraid of dying, you will no longer be a prisoner in your own life. As soon as you realize that your consciousness encompasses more than just your physical body, you will no longer accept the mental restraints that they have imposed upon you. And this is precisely what they do not want to happen. Proving that there is life after death was not the only purpose of the gateway process. It was about coming to terms with the fact that you do not have to wait till death to experience greater states of consciousness. Those who are interested in finding out more about astral projection, out-of-body experiences, and altered states of perception have always had access to the same research that the Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, conducted in secret. All that has happened is that it has been buried beneath layers of distraction, distortion, and training. You were taught to concentrate solely on the material world from the minute you were born until the moment you died. The concept of consciousness was not something that you learned in school. As a result, you were taught to think in linear fashion, to submit to authority, to disregard your intuition, and to look for validation from sources outside of yourself. Distractions are constantly being thrown at you by the media, which keeps your attention preoccupied with things like materialism, entertainment, and useless drama. Everything that is going on around you is intended to draw your attention away from the one place where it truly matters, which is within yourself. On the other hand, the truth is that the gateway process is not required in order to investigate the nature of consciousness. For the purpose of proving what ancient wisdom has been saying for thousands of years, you do not require the research conducted by the CIA. There is no need to acquire the tools. It has been yours from the beginning. Astral projection, lucid dreaming, meditation, and breathwork are all options. Not only are these activities considered esoteric, but they are also strategies that can be used to liberate oneself from the illusion of material existence. When you direct your attention inward and calm the noise of the outer world, you start to comprehend how much of your experience is molded by perception, expectation, and programming. This realization is a momentous occasion. Give it some thought. Whenever you go to sleep at night, your consciousness separates itself from your physical body. While you enter dream states, you encounter realities that are equally as vivid as the ones you experience while you are awake. When you finally come to, however, you dismiss it as a fantasy. But what if it isn't the case? What if dreams are nothing more than an additional kind of awareness that happens to exist outside of the body? It is possible that the boundary between life, dreams, and death is much more porous than we have been encouraged to imagine it to be. Currently, there are individuals who are able to leave their bodies at will, who are able to access information that goes beyond the five senses, and who are able to experience dimensions that are outside of time and space, and they did not require classified materials from the CIA in order to accomplish these feats. In other words, they just recover their awareness from the system that was created to suppress it. Because I am telling you the truth, it is not enough to simply be a human being. During this fleeting instant, you are conscious and perceiving this manifestation of physical reality. On the other hand, everything that is going on around you, from the media to the educational system to the fundamental structure of society, is intended to make you forget that. Mostly due to the fact that a person who is aware that their consciousness is eternal does not experience dread. One who is aware of their own strength does not mindlessly submit to those in positions of authority. A person who is conscious of the illusion does not function according to the same set of guidelines. It is for this reason that they keep you distracted. Because of this, many will tell you that awareness is nothing more than a consequence of the brain. This is the reason why they make fun of people who investigate these concepts. Because as soon as you are able to recall who you are, you will no longer be subject to control. It is not the question of whether life continues after death that is the fundamental question. Why should one wait till death to find out? That is the actual question. Why don't you delve beyond the boundaries of your consciousness right now? What could be more logical than reclaiming the power that has been repressed for centuries? Due to the fact that once you do, everything will change. Fear is no longer a part of your life. The pursuit of pointless distractions is no longer done by you. You see the world for what it really is, and you begin to accept it. A product, a method, or an experience that has been crafted with the intention of keeping you sleeping. But now you are beginning to awaken. There is no turning back once you have awoken from your sleep. Mainly due to the fact that the recognition of the fact that the system has been concealing even more than just the reality about death is the next step. In addition, once you have witnessed it, you will never again view the world in the same manner. It should be clear to you by now that death is not what we were taught to believe. This is not the conclusion. A change is taking place. This is a change in frequency. There is a return to a higher level of consciousness occurring. However, since the truth has been concealed for such a long time, the question that needs to be asked is, what else are they concealing from us? The moment you come to terms with the fact that awareness exists outside of the body, that time is an illusion, and that the mind possesses the ability to transcend space and reality, you begin to understand that this experience is not limited to the concept of death. The issue at hand is control. Throughout the course of several centuries, the most influential organizations in the world have constructed an entire system with the purpose of concealing your true identity. They have used fear, distraction, and manipulation to keep you focused on the material world, and they have made sure that you never ask the questions that are truly important. We are from where we came from. What really is the truth? Are we, in reality, who or what are we? The fact of the matter is that this relates to more than simply governments. The Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, intelligence agencies, and modern institutions are not alone in this regard. This control method dates back to ancient times. Since it has been in existence for thousands of years, it has influenced the way in which people understand life, death, and existence in general. Give it some thought. The teaching that existence is an illusion is prevalent in practically all ancient societies, including the Egyptians, the Sumerians, the Buddhists, the Gnostics, and the Hermeticists. Do you believe that we are souls that are temporarily residing in a physical body? Do you believe that death is nothing more than a portal leading to a different dimension of reality? In spite of this, in today's world, this information is disregarded as a fiction, a religion, or a pseudoscience. The conventional wisdom tells us that awareness is nothing more than a consequence of the brain, that at the moment of death, everything comes to an end. That is the most significant falsehood that has ever been told to the human race. The records from Gateway demonstrate that the United States government was aware that this was not true, that they were providing financing for study into how consciousness extends beyond the physical world, how individuals could modify their experience of time and space, and how altered states of awareness could unlock talents that defy conventional physics. Furthermore, if they were willing to declassify this much information, what other information do they possess that they have not disclosed? For the reason that this is the true secret. Your imagination is the most potent thing that exists in the universe. Not only your thoughts and your creativity, but also your capacity to physically influence the world around you. What they are most concerned about is that it is not that you will attain knowledge about what occurs after death. Rather, it is that you will begin to comprehend what you are capable of accomplishing while you are still living. This is the reason why society is organized in the manner that it is. Because of the system, you are constantly looking for external affirmation, always focused on survival, and always thinking on a tiny scale. You are also constantly fearful, distracted, and detached. Because an aware mind is a mind that cannot be controlled, a completely awake mind cannot be controlled. The things that are discouraged, criticized, or openly suppressed in our environment today are something that you should think about. These include free thought, meditation, astral projection, psychedelic research, alternative history, and astral projection. Anything that casts doubt on the notion that reality is nothing more than what we perceive in front of this very moment. How come? What are the reasons behind the fact that every major system, including school, the media, religion, and science, works so hard to keep people stuck in a limited perspective of existence? Mostly due to the fact that the instant you realize that reality is not what you have been told, you automatically stop playing by their rules. You renounce your dread of dying. You refrain from pursuing distractions that are worthless. The delusion that this physical world is the only thing that exists is dispelled from your mind. The materials that served as the gateway were only the beginning. As one delves farther into the matter, the more evident it becomes. It has nothing to do with governments or politics. It is the biggest secret in the history of humanity. The thing at hand is consciousness itself. The goal is to prevent you from fully comprehending who you really are. It is because the instant you break free, you transform into something that they are unable to contain. It is for this reason that you need to delve further. When you say that this struck a chord with you, you are simply scraping the surface. Within the confines of Insights Academy, we delve even farther into the topics that they are unwilling to discuss. Yes, you will receive the Kybalion at no cost when you sign up for the service. Nevertheless, this is not about a book. In this context, we are discussing information that has been concealed in plain sight, buried beneath multiple layers of deception. Check out the link that is provided in the description before it is too late. Because if they have been able to conceal this much information about death, just think of everything else they have omitted from history. Think about the other things that they have been concealing from you. On the other hand, if you believe that this is the conclusion of the story, you are completely mistaken. This is the farthest you've come. You have seen the proof, the records that have been declassified, and the information that has been withheld. The system has spent decades, if not centuries, concealing this fact from you, and you now understand that death is not the end, that consciousness is not linked to the body, and that the system has been hiding this reality from you. You would be mistaken, however, if you believe that this is the end of the story, mostly due to the fact that this is more than merely life after death, bigger than the Central Intelligence Agency, more significant than top-secret government initiatives, and more significant than everything we've been taught. The main question is not simply what happens to us once we pass away. Rather, it is what we are in our truest form, that which consciousness actually is. What is more crucial is the question of who or what is behind the mechanism that is preventing this information from being shared. We have been persuaded to believe that we are nothing more than physical beings, living lives that are only temporary in a world that is determined by time, suffering, and the need to survive. However, the farther you go into the subject, the more you start to see that our reality is not what we believe it to be. It was indicated in the Gateway Papers that consciousness is the one who generates reality rather than the other way around. In the event that this is the case, then everything that you have been told about existence, about time, about space, about what is real and what isn't, and about what is and isn't real, was never the complete story. You have been made to believe that your mind is far less powerful than it actually is. And this is precisely the reason why this information has been secreted away. Because if you were aware of the truth and had a complete understanding of who you are, you would no longer be afraid to live your life. It would no longer be necessary for you to seek validation from outside authorities. You would no longer adhere to the guidelines of a system that was put in place to ensure that you remain asleep. Indeed, that is the true secret. Not only does awareness continue to exist after death, but it is also the driving force behind everything that exists. To put it another way, the instant you become aware of that reality, you are no longer a captive of the illusion. The ultimate question is not whether or not death is a real thing. It is not a question of whether the government has been concealing things. What is the real question that has to be answered? Considering that after you have realized that death is nothing more than a transition, that reality is a fabrication, and that consciousness itself is the key to everything, what are you going to do with the information that you have gained? Mainly due to the fact that all of this is really pointless until you comprehend the subsequent piece of the jigsaw. If you thought this was shocking, you are about to learn something that will completely alter your perspective. You may watch the video by clicking on it right here. And if you found this video to be meaningful, please let us know by leaving a comment that says, "I understood it."